We have to do some shopping while the kids are gone today. We're finally catching up on some Christmas stuff already.
You can't. It's November. It's the surefire test. Is it nearly Christmas? Look at your calendar. It's November. It's not Christmas.
The state, I don't know if England's the same way, but oh my gosh, it's just nuts here. It was like September and some of our stores were putting up Christmas stuff. Like, that's just nuts.
Well, we kind of have a rule. Caroline and I both have our birthdays in November. And until we've both had our birthdays, then Christmas is just not for discussion.
Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly. Well, welcome back to the DCL podcast, your podcast to help you and your family cruise a little smarter. And I'm always excited to cruise across the Atlantic and welcome back to the show the first guest we ever had on. Welcome back to the show, John.
Hi, Steve.
It's great to have you back, and you were kind enough to send me a couple notes to kind of go along for the show today, and I realized this is the sixth time you've been on the show.
It is, but yeah, the first time for over a year.
First time for over a year, and I know that Amber's going to be on me about, she was talking about, did you ever see Johnny Carson? Was Johnny Carson a thing in England?
I've heard of Johnny Carson,
okay,
but I don't think it was ever on in the UK.
You were probably
chat show host.
Yeah. You're probably focused on like what, the two Ronnies, or let me think.
I'm not that old.
Sorry, I'm trying to remember who was popular when we lived in England when I was a kid. But
yes,
so
that was a long time ago, Steve.
This is quickly going off the rails, and people are going, I have no idea what these two are talking about. But Amber, Johnny Carson used to have, by the fifth time you're on, you got a gold coat, and here you're on the sixth time, and I have nothing for you, but I will put something together, and hopefully sometime soon. That's
just fine, Steve. I still proudly look at my DCL podcast magnet that sits on one of my radiators.
Well, we've got a couple other things in the works, so stand by, and we'll make sure once we get those set up, we'll send you them across the ocean as well. But as we jump into today, why don't you remind the listeners, give a little bit of background of you and your family and kind of your Disney Cruise Line experience.
Sure. So I'm John. I'm married to Caroline, and we have two boys, Sam and James, who are now 13 and 10. And we live in the UK, not far from Nottingham, right in the middle of the country.
We met you guys on our first cruise over to Europe on the beautiful Disney Magic up to Norway, and you guys have been on several cruises since then, correct?
Yep, that's right. And we loved that trip to Norway. And I think even on that first trip, we pretty much fell in love with DCL. So since then, we've done another 2 cruises on the Magic, to the Baltic in 2017 and to the Mediterranean in 2018, all of which we chatted about in previous shows.
I think that cruise up to Norway, when I think back on it, I mean, we had the best weather, didn't we? Other than that first day. It was kind of rainy and foggy that first day, but beyond that, it was amazing.
Yeah, we were really lucky. We were really lucky, weren't we? Yeah. Everybody said, you're going to Norway. Why have you booked a balcony? You're never going to use that. But we did. We were sat out there. It was lovely.
Well, here it is, 2019. And you guys, like us, it took you quite a while before you got on one of the bigger ships. You guys decided to spread your wings a little bit and take a little bit different cruise. Why don't you tell everybody what you guys did this year?
We sure did. It certainly felt like spreading our wings. Tonight we're going to be talking about the 8-night Eastern Caribbean cruise that we just took on the Disney Fantasy.
So I thought you had a kind of a good point here, but, you know, being from England, how does it work booking a cruise over there? So over here, we've got travel agents you can work with. You can go to the website. I know that and I don't want to go too deep in the woods here, but I know Walt Disney World offers some different types of opportunities for people from over in England. Does Disney Cruise Line do that, or how do you book a cruise over in England?
Well, we do have travel agents. Certainly not as many as we used to. A lot of the travel agents that kind of have retail premises have disappeared because the internet's taken over, as it has in so many areas. I guess most people these days will use the internet, and that's what we did. But this was kind of a complicated. This was a complicated vacation, because what we wanted to do was do 2 days ahead of the cruise in a Walt Disney World hotel just to get over the jet lag, and then have another 6 nights at Walt Disney World after the cruise. So effectively a 3-part cruise. Booking the cruise bit was easy. Just book that straight away on the DCL website. I think we booked it on the opening day for silver members. Super simple. I kind of thought that booking the hotel part was a bit too difficult on Walt Disney World's website, so I ended up calling them up. And actually, it was a bit too difficult for them as well.
Oh, no.
They got a bit confused. So you're going to stay in a hotel before, then you're doing a cruise, then you're going to do a hotel after. So I actually ended up with 3 completely different booking references: one for the bit before, one for the cruise, and one for the bit after, which was fine, but it was complicated to organise. We had to make a slight compromise, which is that when you go to Walt Disney World, there are deals if you come from the UK. So you get a dining plan automatically if you come from the UK. And you also automatically receive a 14-day parks pass as part of the reservation, and a good pass. So you can do the hopper thing. So you go to as many parks as you want on the same day. But we were only allowed to use that after the cruise and not in those 2 days before. So on that first day, all we could do was just hang out by the pool. We went over to Disney Springs, so we weren't allowed to go in the park. And actually that was fine because, we were pretty tired. We had a bit of jet lag, so we wanted a down day anyway. But the whole big booking piece was kind of complex.
I'm sure it's not like the first time they did this, but so that kind of surprises me. Well, let's turn to the cruise a little bit itself before we talked about getting over there. Why did you guys pick this one?
It's an interesting question because actually in 2019, we were planning to have a year off from cruising.
I remember you talking about that. Yep.
When Disney released that 2019 fall schedule, I thought I'd just have a quick look, just to see if there's anything interesting. And this cruise just jumped out at me straight away. It was 8 nights rather than the typical 7 that the Fantasy does. It was stopping at some amazing destinations that the Fantasy doesn't regularly do. But most importantly, the dates coincided perfectly with our kids having a 2-week half-term break from school. So it just looked perfect, and we dived in and booked it.
It's kind of dangerous when those dates come out. That's what happened with us with the Greek cruise coming up this summer. We had no plans whatsoever to do anything in the summer, and all of a sudden that cruise just jumped out to us. So I totally understand.
I'm pretty confident it'll happen again.
I know, between the two of us, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. So you've got this planned, and we kind of talked about you spent 2 days before. So you guys have been to Orlando before. You fly in. Where did you stay the night before again?
We stayed at Animal Kingdom Lodge for the 2 nights before, and then the Polynesian for the 6 nights after.
Okay, and what did you think of Animal Kingdom Lodge?
Loved it. Really, really liked it. Yeah, I thought it was the decor was beautiful. Rooms were pretty nice. We stayed on the club level, and the food in the club lounge was great. I had an amazing view out, looking out at the animals, at the zebras, the giraffes, all of the other animals. So loved Animal Kingdom Lodge. Thought it was really good.
Did you get to interact with some of the cast members there as far as talking about the animals or anything like that? Did you get down and they have the night vision goggles in the evening that you can use?
Yeah, no, we didn't do that actually. No, we didn't. Not so much. But there were cast members at the back of the hotel who were available to answer questions. So we didn't really do that, but we saw lots of people around.
I think that's one of the hidden gems of Animal Kingdom Lodge, because we were there right after you guys were on the ship, and we spent the one night in Animal Kingdom Lodge too. And Andrew, my oldest, and I went down before we drove over to Port Canaveral and was looking at the animals, and we ended up talking to one of the cast members, and he was from Zimbabwe, and just had an amazing kind of talk with him and kind of his experiences and where he came from and whatnot. I think we love the Animal Kingdom Lodge too for all those different reasons. Yeah,
really liked it. I'd recommend it thoroughly. Absolutely recommend it.
Well, so there you guys are. What were your thoughts about getting over to Port Canaveral?
We'd heard from some of the contributors to your show that if you use the official Disney transportation, you tend not to get to the port until early afternoon. So we kind of figured that getting a ride out there would be a better bet, as we like to get on the ship as early as possible. So I looked around for some recommendations on TripAdvisor and found that people had good experiences with a company called Access Line Transportation. So I booked return journeys with them directly on their website, which is easy enough. Drivers turned up on time both ways, out to Port Canaveral and back. They were very friendly. Both the guys were really friendly. So I'd vouch for that company, Access Line Transportation, they're called. I do have one observation, which is that people tend to say that it's around an hour out to Port Canaveral. But for us, that wasn't quite the reality. The drive was fine, and we were probably approaching the port after 60 minutes. The weather wasn't great. It was a bit stormy, so there was some traffic around. But from the time of arriving at the entrance to the port to getting dropped off was 40 minutes, because there was just a huge line of cars moving through very, very slowly. So from being picked up at a little after 9 o'clock, it was actually almost 11 before we got out of the car. So maybe we were unlucky. Maybe it's not like that every time. And it's not a complaint at all, because we were super relaxed about the whole thing. But maybe just a different perspective, maybe a little reality check for people.
I think that just tends to be Port Canaveral. You and I are used to, leaving out of... You guys left out of Barcelona, right, on your Mediterranean?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I think, in those ports, people tend to... I think the crowd gets spread out a little bit more because there's so much stuff to do in the cities, especially on those European cruises. Whereas Port Canaveral, everybody wants to get there and get on as quickly as they can. And even when we went on the Dream this past time, we got there about 12:30. And when we got on the Fantasy, I think the crowd had pretty much got on the ship by then. But this time, we were kind of in the same thing. I think it took us like about 25 or 30 minutes for me to drop off on a weekend of kids, and then I had to go turn the car in. So I think that's just Port Canaveral. People want to get on early, and you either got to get there right at the beginning or a little bit later to meet that crowd. Otherwise, you're going to be in it.
Yeah, I think you're right. It was just peak time, I think.
Well, how was check-in? So this is the first time you actually get to see Port Canaveral, Disney's own cruise port. What were your thoughts of the cruise port itself? And maybe did you just check out the model or get some pictures with Mickey or anything like that?
Security, I guess getting through security was fine. There was a bit of a line. Took us about 20 minutes maybe just to get through that whole security thing. But check-in itself, so Disney check-in, super quick. I guess we stood in line for maybe a minute, maybe 2 minutes, but probably a minute max. So that was great. We're in boarding group 10. So we waited around for perhaps another 20 minutes, had a look at the ship model, which was good. And then by about 10 past 12, we were on the Fantasy. So you mentioned the terminal. For what it's worth, I hated that terminal building.
That's okay.
I really didn't like it. I know it's supposed to look like 1920s Art Deco. I get that. And I get that it's not been around since 1920. But it kind of felt like it had been. And they hadn't really touched it since then. And it didn't really feel Disney for me. It didn't really feel that it was befitting that Disney brand. I didn't get a special feel. I expected something different, I think. When you depart from those cruise terminals in Europe, it is just a big warehouse building. And in my head, I built Port Canaveral up to be something a bit more special. And it wasn't. So I don't know. That's just my take. But it felt like Disney could spend a bit of money just giving it a bit more colour, really, just making it a bit brighter. I think of Disney as being bright and cheerful and colourful, and I didn't get that feel from it. But anyway, it's a very small point, and hey, we're on the Fantasy, so who cares?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm kind of hoping that they put a little bit of money into it when the Wish comes and they upgrade the terminal space. I think that is probably in the cards, but like you, we'll see what they come up with. Well, first time on a Dream Class ship. You guys have been on the Magic every time. What was your family's kind of thoughts as you guys walked on the Fantasy? What did you think of her?
Oh, just beautiful. I mean, even as we were driving up, she was docked right next to us, and you just look and think, that is one beautiful ship. And there were a couple of other ships around. I think it was a Royal Caribbean a couple of Royal Caribbeans also. And the Fantasy is just so beautiful compared to those other ships. Yeah, we walked into the atrium and it goes up all those floors, and it's beautiful. It's just a lovely, lovely ship.
They're kind of similar. I mean, obviously they're different. Okay, the Dreams and the Fantasy are different than the Wonder and the Magic, but there's some similarities in kind of the layouts and what they offer. Did you guys wander around the ship initially to kind of, take it all in to kind of get your footing, or what did you guys do for that?
Do you know what? It just felt, from the minute we stepped on board, it just felt very familiar. I mean, I've got some thoughts on this later on that we can cover, I guess. But we never felt like it was hugely different. We kind of automatically found our way up to Cabanas, and we did explore a bit on that first afternoon. But it felt like being at home. Yes, it was a bigger ship, but it just felt straight away like we were back at home.
There's that familiarity to it, and I love the way you put that. Feeling at home. I think we all that have cruised and want to go back every time just have that same feeling of being back where you kind of belong a little bit when you get back on those ships.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, this time you guys are on the Fantasy. What kind of cabin did you guys book?
Well, for anybody who's listened before, they'll have probably gathered that we're creatures of habit, the Towler family. And we've always booked deluxe family ocean staterooms with a veranda. So that's what we did again. And we chose Deck 8 for this cruise because I'd read up that Deck 8 was a good choice as it's very quiet because it has cabins above and cabins below throughout the entire deck. And I think that was good advice. We heard no noise really throughout the entire cruise. So Deck 8, good choice.
I think you guys stay at Deck 8 every time on the Magic as well, don't you?
We do, and I complained about it last time in the last podcast we did that we did have some noise from above on our next cruise that we'll talk about that we've booked for next year. Well, we're back on the Magic and we're back on Deck 8.
I think that when we get on the Magic this June, I'm going to be walking down Deck 8 and there's just going to be a plaque on one of the rooms that says Towler family.
Yeah, probably.
Well, you guys get a veranda. And, having a veranda up in Norway with the ports that they have up there that you stop in with the scenery and then cruising through Europe as well. Although, I don't know, some of the ports in Europe, I guess, are pretty industrial where you park, but you still get some pretty good scenery up there. What did you think about having a veranda this time in the Caribbean?
Oh, loved it. I guess we love the veranda. We used it quite a lot in Norway because we were lucky with the weather. We used it a lot on the Mediterranean cruise. But it's a fantastic space just to go and relax, maybe read a book. And to be honest, I just love to sit out there and watch the ocean, particularly in the evenings when it's dark and you can look up at the stars. And it's just a great space to go and relax. The kids don't use it as much, if I'm honest. Caroline's not a huge fan of sitting out on the veranda. So I think they'd be less bothered if we didn't have one. But I would miss it hugely. It's one of my favourite places just to go and sit.
I couldn't agree with you more. We've got a ocean view booked in June, so I'm kind of curious going back to that just to see how that feels after having a veranda so many different times. So, well, this is a Halloween on the High Seas cruise. I know that Caroline is a huge fan of Halloween. Is Halloween a big thing in England? Is that celebrated as much? I remember Guy Fawkes Day when I was over there, which I know doesn't have anything to do with Halloween necessarily.
No, it doesn't.
But
no, there's no connection at all.
Sorry, my brain is going all random places today, John.
That's all right.
But is that big in England? And are you a big fan of Halloween?
It is big. And it's an example of the Brits copying the Americans. When I was a kid, trick-or-treating didn't exist. No such thing. And I don't remember that we did anything on Halloween. So trick-or-treating is a thing these days. I mean, we live out in the countryside. We only have like half a dozen houses near us. We don't do trick-or-treating because there kind of isn't really anywhere to go and trick-or-treat. It's a thing. It's not as big a thing as it is in the States. Obviously, we've had our experience, and I totally drawn a blank. I know that we've talked to one other person who's going to come on and talk about Halloween on the High Seas. That 3-day cruise, the Halloween is all compacted into Pirate Night too, and I think it's just really tough to experience it very well as far as like all the different activities. What were some of the activities that you guys got to experience on this one, being a longer cruise? Did they spread it out more, or was it all in one day as well? The answer is a bit of both. So I listened to the show you did. So I was trying to compare in my mind our experience compared to how you described it on your 3-night cruise. Obviously, there was the big pumpkin tree in the main atrium, which was completely decorated. So all the pumpkins were already on the tree when we boarded. Okay. Because that was a question I think you weren't quite sure about. There was, on that very first evening on the cruise, there was with the same launch event that I think you guys had, where a guy in costume told a kind of spooky story for the benefit of Christy. Not that spooky. and they lit all the pumpkins up, so they lit the tree, and that was fun. We kind of liked that. With other decorations, there were Halloween decals, clings, I think you call them, don't you, in the big porthole windows. But that was about it for decoration. And then lots and lots of people dressed up for dinner on a Halloween night. So you didn't have a Halloween night dinner, did you? Because you just went straight into Pirate Night. Right. So did they do anything different for the dinner itself? No, the menu was the same. Okay. It was just and a huge amount of people dressed up. So that was probably the big opportunity for people to put their costumes on, I guess. And then after dinner on that same night, there was the trick or treat event, which I think you alluded to. It was absolute chaos. So many people trying to get candy. And our cruise only had 700 children on it, which is not many. That's low for a Disney cruise. So I can't even imagine what it might be like on the other cruises. So it was complete chaos. The lines to get to some of the candy tables were unreal. But having said that, we kind of persevered a bit. The kids managed to get enough candy, because you could just get ridiculous amounts if you queued at every table throughout the evening. You'd have bags and bags full. So the kids got enough. And actually, we discovered that as well as the tables where you could just go and pick up candy, there were kind of tucked away in corners a few little fun mini games that you could go and try, like throwing bean bags into a cauldron. And those mini games, people kind of didn't seem to have spotted them, so they weren't that busy, and that seemed to be the thing to do rather than just stand in lines. And then there was a lot of the characters appeared. Mickey and Minnie and Goofy and the others all came out, and there was a kind of dance thing going on. James danced with Mickey, as you might expect him to. So we had fun, but we did it for like half an hour. I think if you were there much longer than that, you could just go crazy really quickly.
It's kind of too bad. I don't know what they can do. It's to maybe ease the crowds a little bit, other than maybe having it a couple different times, maybe. But I don't know.
Well, I think that my take would be, even though it's over the three floors of the atrium, 3 decks of the atrium, so deck 3, deck 4, and deck 5. But because it's by the elevators, you just got people coming out of the elevators straight into a huge crowd. So the way I would do it differently, I would spread it out into some of the lounges. So I'd put some stuff in D lounge and just take it out of being 100% in that atrium space. I think that would spread it out much better.
That's some good points there. I also noticed that you guys had a Jack Skellington animation class. Did you take in any of that and some other different activities?
We did do the Jack Skellington animation class. It turns out Jack Skellington is pretty much the easiest character you can possibly draw.
That's why.
Although still too challenging for me, but for Caroline, who's pretty good at art. Yeah, so we did do that. We did do the Jack Skellington class. There were other things throughout the cruise. On that main evening, there wasn't a big show in the main theatre, in the Walt Disney Theatre. There was a 4D showing of Nightmare Before Christmas. I don't think it's the full version. I think it's kind of a short version of A Nightmare Before Christmas. So we did go along to that, but we were really tired. We'd had excursions on the previous couple of days. So about 40 minutes in, James was effectively asleep. So we called it quits and went off to bed and abandoned that. And there were Halloween-themed activities on other days, kind of dotted around throughout the cruise, such as the animation class we mentioned. There was a how to cook a spider cake, and you could spot them. They were marked on the navigator in a different colour, but for me they felt a bit like an afterthought, and we generally ignored them. So I suppose my take on the Halloween of the High Seas part of it overall, the Halloween aspect wasn't a huge thing. It was a huge thing for like 4 hours. It felt kind of more of a fun add-on. So that would be our take on it. I think if you're big on Halloween, if Halloween's something you're really into and you participated in every Halloween event you possibly could throughout the whole cruise, you could probably make a lot of it. But going back to is Halloween big in the UK? It's not a big thing for our family. So it was fun to do for a few hours, but it was never going to be the focus of the cruise, I suppose.
No, and I think that was kind of our family's same take on it as well. It was kind of fun to have that atmosphere around it, but Our focus was more just enjoying ourselves for 3 days than trying to take in everything. Well, from the Halloween-themed activities, how about the actual shows on the ship itself? Did you guys have an opportunity to see them?
We did. Yep, we absolutely did. So Leslie was our cruise director this time, and she hosted each night. I know that some people give her negative reviews, but it's the second time we've had her. We went to the Baltic with Leslie. I really like her. I think she's enthusiastic without being false and over the top, and that works well for me. I always like those first nights when the cruise directors just give you a bit of information about who's on the ship. So she gave us some numbers about nationalities on that first night. Overall on the ship, there were 3,386 people, which is not many. If you think it's got a capacity of 4,000, 3,386, not that many, despite the fact it was a sold-out cruise. So 26 different nationalities. We had 22 Australians who'd made a very long journey to be there. There were 121 from the UK, 130 Canadians, and 2,900 and something Americans. And as I said before, I mentioned there were only 700 kids on board. That's a really low ratio of kids to adults. Only about 20% of people on board were under the age of 18. And I think we learnt during the cruise that this was a cruise that was a little different from the norm. It was one night longer, visiting some different ports. So the demographic was definitely older than I think you would experience on most Disney Fantasy cruises. There was a really high number of very experienced cruisers, huge amount of gold and platinum lanyards around. And actually we had a couple in a cabin just 6 or 7 along from us who were on their 84th Disney cruise. Which is just incredible. And the reason we know that is they had a sheet of paper pinned to the outside of their cabin door listing all the Disney cruises they'd ever done, and in fact all the ones they had booked. I think their first one was 2001. They went on the very first one to Hawaii. They did, I think, an inaugural transatlantic. They went on the very first sailing of the Fantasy. They went on the very first sailing of the Dream. So they've done 84, and they've already got their plans of getting to 100. I think they've already got booked up to get to 100. Amazing. Just amazing.
That is amazing. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm kind of bummed to hear that about Leslie. I've never really, I guess I haven't noticed that on the message boards, or I don't go on the message boards a lot. But I
think she's really good.
I love her too. Yeah, she had probably one of the best, most memorable kind of interactions with her and Andrew, our oldest, on our cruise over in the Mediterranean, and I think she's just top notch. I love her. So
exactly. So that was kind of my your question was what shows did we go to?
Yeah.
I completely went off on a tangent talking about something else. So. Back to the shows. So the welcome show on the first night was fine, nothing special really. Night two was a ventriloquist called Lynn Trefzger, I think she's called. She was hilarious. Highly recommend her if anybody comes across her. Lynn Trefzger, she was great. Night 3 was Aladdin, so first Broadway style show. I loved it. Thought Aladdin was brilliant. Night 4 we had a comedy juggler called Max Winfrey, who was pretty good. Obviously not as good as friend of the show, Marcus Monroe, in case you're listening, Marcus. He was good, but you're great. So we had a fun time with Max. Then it was the Halloween night with the Nightmare Before Christmas thing. And then night 6 was a comedy hypnotist, which I had grave forebodings about. Hypnotism, not my thing at all. So normally as a family, we try and sit as close to the front as we can. But for this particular show, we went up on the balcony just in case.
You didn't want to be called up there, did you?
Yeah, we were kind of scared, and we thought, well, we might be here 5 minutes and then we might be off. So it turned out to be really, really entertaining, although still a little freaky. So the hypnotist was a guy called Ricky Calmon, who I gather is actually quite famous. There's no doubt he's an absolute master of his trade. I think my worry with hypnotists is they tend to just make people do stupid stuff for kind of cheap entertainment. But I do think in this case, he managed to find the balance between making it funny for the audience, but without slipping into embarrassing poor taste. And actually, when he had one lady singing along to Let It Go, it was you had to be there moment, but it was probably the most memorable moment of the whole cruise. He summed it up as, who knew? Because she was just amazing, just amazing. So he was great, but a bit freaky. And then the final 2 nights were Broadway-style shows. Firstly, we had Believe, which I thought was a bit random, but fun. And then on our final night, we had the big one. We had the debut of Frozen on the Fantasy. So we obviously went to the second showing as we were in main dining, and it was crazy. People pushing and shoving to get a seat, people climbing over seats, arguments about saving seats. I've never seen anything like that before. And for 10, 15 minutes, it was pretty unseemly, to be honest. And I just hope that everyone got in the end. As 2 minutes to go before it started, there were still people wandering around looking for a free space. So it was this is probably an English expression about rugby, but we would call it a scrum. It was just a huge mass of people trying to get in. So anyway, once we got past that complete madness, I thought the show itself was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. The two ladies playing Anna and Elsa were both terrific. And of course, Olaf stole the show, as you would expect. A great night. I think it's a really good move that Disney have put that show on the fantasy. Frozen's so popular still. Frozen 2's coming out this week in the UK. So I think that's a good move. I don't think it matters having a show that's set in the frozen north on a ship that's going down to the Caribbean. I don't think that matters. If it's a great show, it's a great show. So main evening entertainment, I'd go good job, Disney. I think we had good variety. The quality was consistently high, and we had great fun.
I agree with you too. Having Frozen on there, having two shows, the ability to see two shows like that, like Aladdin and Frozen on one cruise, I think is pretty nice. The other shows are fine, like Believe and whatnot, but I love the fact that they're kind of investing and kind of upping their game a little bit. But I do have to tell you this: good friend of mine from high school is a hypnotist comedian.
Okay. Okay.
And he performs on Carnival and Royal Caribbean, and I've been contemplating back and forth, bringing him on here to kind of talk about his experiences. But that's a whole other side note too, which I could go down.
That would be interesting. We have hypnotists on the TV in the UK.
Yeah.
And I'm not interested in seeing people wandering around barking like a dog.
Yeah.
That's just cheap entertainment. So I'd be really interested to understand how they kind of find that balance between making it funny but not making it cheap and nasty.
Yeah. Okay. Well, stand by. I'm going to try and I haven't approached him about it yet.
That would be good.
I'm gonna maybe try and do that. But yeah, the whole hypnotist thing, it kind of befuddles me a little bit too. So, all right. Well, on to some of the onboard activities. I know that you guys are not shy about getting out and doing things. That's kind of your mantra. What were some of the things you got to do on the fantasy? What'd you think?
We participated. Of course we participated. That's what we do. And I thought the entertainment team on the fantasy were absolutely brilliant. And I would like to give a special mention to Jenny and Katie from the UK and Dean from Canada, who were terrific, just brilliant, and probably sick of the sight of us by the end of the week. It's those guys again.
Here come the towlers.
Yeah, exactly. So we did several trivias, didn't win any. We did the feud, we did the wheel, both multiple times. We raced potatoes in the Mickey 200. We completed all three of the Midship Detective Agency hunts. Muppets one's the best. James took part in the talent show, and then, wait for it, as a family, we participated in a game show we hadn't done before called Family Fusion, which is kind of a mashup of all the other game shows combined. I think it's new in the last year or so. And we only went and won it.
What?
Yeah. So now all of us have medals to go with the one that I won back in 2016. And we're very proud of ourselves. And still a little smug.
And I did have to appreciate the picture that you sent me afterwards with you guys all wearing your medals. So
indeed, the minute we had some Wi-Fi, you got sent that picture.
I love it. You guys are gonna have to get a huge place to show these off in the house someplace.
Yeah, we should do that. I can see them from where I'm sitting. Actually, this happens.
Well, I'm going to use an English expression here. That's brilliant. So, what else did you guys do? Anything else worth mentioning?
So, on the first day, Caroline and I did the Art of the Theme Show tour. First time I'd done it. It was fun. Caroline had done it before on the Magic, and she said that actually she felt that she'd learnt a little bit more on the Magic, but it was good. We did quite a few character meet and greets. The lines were always reasonable, I think. We had a few port day afternoons when we were back on the ship, and it was kind of quiet. So we took the opportunity to check out the pools, and we rode the aqueduct. Many times we rode the aqueduct. So much fun. We had so much fun on the aqueduct. It's brilliant. In fact, on one of the port days, I think it was Puerto Rico, I think it was San Juan, a huge rainstorm came in, and it was raining so hard. So we put our swimming costumes on and we went up on the deck and we rode the aqueduct in the rain. fantastic.
Oh, brilliant. My oldest, Andrew, and I in Onawake rode it probably for an hour just straight right after dinner on our last cruise. There's those few times. So obviously most people probably went into the port, so the ships were kind of quiet in the afternoon until people got back, huh?
Yeah, I think maximum wait time that we had. So we were probably on it like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, something like that. Uh-huh. And we waited, somewhere between no minutes and 5 minutes. Sometimes we walked up the steps and there was nobody there. So 5-minute wait maximum, I think. It was brilliant. It was just tremendous.
Perfect. Quite a different experience on a 3-day, but we'll just leave it at that. So Let's move on to Pirate Night. Now, are you guys pirate people? Are you fans, and what did you think?
No, not really. We don't. I think you'll have gathered we don't do dressing up. It's not really our thing, and particularly when you're going across from the UK to the States, I'm not going to take up a whole load of luggage space with costumes, so we don't do dressing up. And actually, never even stayed up for the fireworks before, but we did this time, and I'm glad we did. I'm not hugely big on fireworks. I think partly because over 20 years ago, I was lucky to attend an event called Thunder over Louisville, which I hope is famous in America, given that it's in Kentucky. Ever heard of it?
Yeah, I have heard of it, but I've never seen it.
Okay, well, I thought it was just one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. It was. I don't think it's quite as big today as it was then, but huge. One of the biggest firework displays on the planet. So nothing will ever top that for me. But it was different to see fireworks launched from a ship. The atmosphere was good on the deck. There was a party atmosphere. So Pirate Night, I wouldn't say it was a highlight for us, but yeah, I'm glad we did it.
I think that we've seen the show enough, and so for going forward, just finding some space over there on the right, which is the starboard side, and watching the fireworks, enjoy that. It seems like the fireworks are a little bit longer on the bigger ships than they are on the Magic and the Wonder, but maybe that's just in my mind. But we do enjoy the fireworks.
Yeah, it was fine. The kids were a bit bored waiting for it all to happen, but yeah, I'm glad we stayed up for it.
Well, good. Well, let's move on to the food. A little bit different restaurants, kind of similar themes in some ways, but what were your thoughts on the different restaurants and the food overall?
So I thought the decor of all of them was good, although I think contrary to probably general opinion, I preferred being in Animator's Palette to the other two. I thought Animator's Palette on the Fantasy was really, really well done. I loved that decor. I was a little disappointed that in Royal Court and Enchanted Garden, dinner was just dinner. So there was nothing at all in terms of entertainment. Even if the waiters had done a parade with flags like they do on the Magic, that would have livened it up a bit. Maybe it's a scale thing and it's just too difficult. I don't know. But the decor of the restaurants, I liked all of them. I thought they were all really good. So I suppose the entertainment is Crush in Animators. I wasn't blown away by Crush. It was okay, but nothing special. I thought the animated drawing show on the second night in Animators was still fun, even though it's the fourth time we do it. Still, the fourth time we've done it, still enjoyed that. And our serving team were good, really, really good. Usual puzzles and magic tricks to keep us entertained. So we had a good time with those guys. As for the food itself, anyone who's listened to me before will know that although I wouldn't consider myself in any way to be a foodie, I'm not a huge fan of the Disney food. I think it ranges from average to good in the main restaurants, and our experience this time reflected that variation. I think Disney are particularly poor at pasta dishes, and why they persist with whole wheat pasta on the kids' menu just beats me. Who eats that? It's just bad. It's just whole wheat pasta for kids is just bad. So maybe the problem is that we need to go to Palo or Remy one time. Still never done that. But I think, as you know, Steve, we tend to stick together as a family, so that's not really our thing. Maybe Caroline and I will go and do it one day. We did try the snails, you'll be pleased to hear.
And?
Which only I had ever eaten before, and the verdict from us was, bleh.
Oh, no.
So we'll leave the snails for you from now on.
Oh, well, there'll be more for us, I guess, when Frank and I get on. Are James and Sam, are they starting to eat off the adults menu a little bit more, or do they stick with the kids still? Or
Sam eats exclusively off the adults menu. He wouldn't ever consider having anything on the kids menu, and James is pretty much still on the kids menu. So he'll taste things on the adult menu, but he prefers to stick to mac and cheese and pizza and a burger, really.
Yeah, I think that's helped our kids, or Alex. He kind of ate everything off the adult menu this time. He's become a steak guy, so you got a steak, steak every night. And the kids' food just tends, they make it in mass. It's under heat lamps so sometimes. And with the pasta, I know what you're talking about. So, well, any other thoughts on food on board? So you guys didn't do Palo or Remy. We haven't done Remy yet either, but how about Cabanas or some of the other restaurants around there?
Cabanas on the Fantasy was pretty good for a buffet-style restaurant. We went there for breakfast and lunch most days, and it never felt too crowded. I was kind of worried that it would be on a bigger ship, but we always managed to find a table without any problem at all. And the ice creams from Ice Cream were very welcome on the hot afternoons. They were a definite highlight.
The one thing we didn't really touch on before we go into the ports, did you have an opportunity, or what did you guys think of like the adult areas and just kind of the D lounge and that around the ship? A little bit different. We found, like you said, just to go back to the trivia, oh my gosh, more people, way more competition as far as those type of experiences. Good on you guys for winning the Family Fusion. What did you think of
Thank you.
The Tube and some of the other things like that?
Well, I was going to do a quick compare and contrast piece later on. Oh. So talk about the lounges and stuff there.
We could do that then.
So,
if you want.
That's fine. So adult areas, the answer is didn't really do them actually, because we tend to stick together by and large. Caroline and I don't tend to go and hang out on our own. Yeah, I can't really add anything particularly interesting because we didn't really do it.
Oh, no problem. I did enjoy the Tube, I guess, a little bit better than Fathoms, and just a little bit more themed down there. And Anwick and I both loved the Skyline Lounge. That was kind of nice. A little bit different theming. So
yeah, we went and visited all of them, and the Tube was pretty good actually. It didn't exactly remind me of the Tube in London. So,
is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Authenticity.
Well, is that a good thing or a bad thing that it's not like the Tube in London?
That's a good thing. Okay. That's absolutely a good thing. You don't want to be like that. I thought the Tube was a pretty good space. I did like the Tube.
Okay, perfect. Well, let's move on to, besides the fact that I know you guys love just being on the ships themselves, let's talk a little bit about where this cruise went and your times at the port. So we didn't really talk about it at the beginning, but you guys left out of Port Canaveral. You had 2 days at sea, and then your first port day comes on day 4 where you go to St. Kitts. What did you guys have planned there?
Right. So I think the first thing to say is that St. Kitts is tiny. It's a very small island. It's only 18 miles long by 5 miles across, with a population of under 50,000. So it's pretty small. And I think for Europeans, on our first visit to the Caribbean, our initial impressions as we pulled into the port, which is the capital, Basse-Terre, was that it was unlike anything we'd ever seen before. Clearly volcanic, very green, and actually just very beautiful, just rather beautiful. So we had booked a tour. We booked a half-day tour called Essential St. Kitts with Fairview, which was due to leave around 9 a.m. And again, the start of that, the organisation of that, was somewhat different experience from our previous cruises. I mean, you'll know this from going to Europe, but we're used to getting off the ship to see a fleet of modern luxury motor coaches lined up all ready for us. So within 5 minutes of leaving the ship, we're on our way. St. Kitts and Antigua were really not like that. And I think basically it's just because the ports are so small, they can only get a limited number of vehicles close by at one time. So for us, on our experience generally, heading off the ship to do a tour, it was probably 30 minutes after leaving the ship before we actually got to board our minibus. And that's not a complaint. That's just a difference and just the logistics of the tiny islands. But if you've only ever cruised in Europe, it is something that feels very different. So anyway, on St. Kitts, our minibus driver, who's a guy called Winston, was also our guide, as he told us many times during the day. And he was great. He entertained us royally right throughout the day. He insisted that we call him young Mr. Churchill, as in Winston Churchill. So he was hilarious. So we started off with a drive around the capital, Basse-Terre, and I would summarise that as not much to see here then. So I kind of passed by in an uninspiring manner. And then we had a short drive out to our first stop, which was Fairview, which is a 300-year-old colonial great house. And obviously the Caribbean has the history of slavery with which we're all familiar. And I guess I was worried that there might be some awkwardness around that. But our experience was that the locals were perfectly happy to talk about it. It just seemed to be, well, that was then, it happened, but here we are now. So we had around 30 minutes at Fairview, which was just long enough to hear a short talk about its history, walk around the house, take in the beautiful gardens and views. And then we drove off to the next stop, which was a batik, fabric and garment dyeing enterprise, which I think was really just an opportunity to try and sell us some local merchandise, not particularly inspiring for us, at least. And then the final stop was the Brimstone Hill Fortress, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, again dating back around 300 years. The kids particularly liked it, as there were big cannons all around that they could go and sit on. But worth noting perhaps that it's a steep climb to the very top where the main fortress is, so not easily accessible unless you're reasonably active. So we enjoyed our tour. It was very different to anything we'd seen before. It was hot and it was tiring. But I think we were lucky to have been with a super entertaining driver. I'm not sure that there's much else of a historical nature to see on St. Kitts, but if it's your first time and you want to see around that particular destination, this was a pretty decent way to do it.
Well, interesting. So from there, you guys go on to Antigua. What were your thoughts there, and what did you guys do?
Yep, that's right. So I'm gonna call it Antigua.
Oh, sorry.
That's right. You can call it whatever. I'm gonna call it Antigua. So Antigua felt very different, as it's a much larger island, about twice the population of St. Kitts, and it felt much, much more developed than St. Kitts did. And again, we booked a half-day tour called Amazing Antigua. And the first thing to say is, oh my goodness, the roads. So the ship docks in the capital, St. John's, which is in the northwest of the island. And all of the main historical attractions are in the very south. So we started off with a 40-minute bus ride across the island. Our guide pointed out all sorts of interesting buildings along the way, but boy, was it bumpy. For anyone who has back or neck problems, I'd say that any sort of bus tour around Antigua is probably not for you. We survived the bumpy roads, and eventually we arrived at the Dow's Hill Interpretation Centre, where we had a video presentation of Antigua's history, and then a short walk around another small ruined fort with a second stop at a viewpoint just a few minutes away. And the views were incredible, just absolutely tremendous. And the guide even pointed out the estate, which is owned by Eric Clapton, the world-famous guitarist. And we learnt that Eric Clapton's very committed to Antigua and actually helped to found a drug and rehab centre on the island. So that was all kind of interesting background information. And then our final stop was another short 10-minute drive down to Nelson's Dockyard, named after Admiral Horatio Nelson, who was based in Antigua for a couple of years. And it's a restored colonial dockyard and really lovely to walk around for 45 minutes or so. We were offered a free glass of rum punch or fruit punch, which was very welcome because it was hot. We just wandered around the buildings, and there were a few shops selling things. And we came across a really great shop selling locally made wooden carvings of whales and other fish, and we could have spent a lot of money in there. But we were sensible, and we limited ourselves to just one small purchase of a whale, which we were confident would fit into our luggage. So loved Nelson's Dockyard. Really, really fun place to walk around. When I wrote down those notes, I read through what I'd written, and I felt that I hadn't really done it justice. There wasn't one single thing that stood out as being amazing, but Antigua was beautiful, very chilled out, amazing views, friendly people. And actually, if we had to pick out our favourite destination, it would be Antigua.
Did they have any ships in the dockyard too? Kind of like period ships, or was it just the dockyard itself, just out of curiosity?
It's just the dockyard. I think you can come and dock your modern day ship there if you want to. Although actually, we saw a huge, multi-million pound luxury yacht moored, but actually it wasn't at Nelson's Dockyard. It was moored just 5 minutes away along the coast, but a huge thing, the sort of thing Bill Gates or those guys would own, but no period ships, no.
Well, I'm glad you guys enjoyed it down in the islands there. It's that island time that they talk about where things are a little bit slower. Did you have the buses where there's no doors also on any of your Ventures?
No. There were doors. I'm not sure they had much in the way of suspension, but there were doors.
When we did the zip line in, oh shoot, I'm totally drawing a blank now. But when we did the zip line on our tour,
Tortola?
In Tortola, it was my Alex, and then there was another family. So it was me, Alex, and their son in the back, and there was like no door. And I was like, all right, you guys sit over to the right so that you don't go flying out. I'll sit next to the open door. But
no, the buses were good.
Yeah.
But if all these cruise ships are going into Antigua and there's literally one main road that takes you from the capital across to all the excursion destinations, I think if you were the Antigua Tourist Authority, you might want to spend a bit of money on the roads.
Well, from there, you guys are on to one place that I've actually been to before, San Juan, Puerto Rico. What did you guys have planned there?
We'd read in advance that the ship docks right in the Old Town area, which most people say is the most interesting part of San Juan, unless you want to go on a visit out to the Bacardi rum factory, which we weren't too bothered about. So we'd read that you can just explore very easily on your own. So we didn't book an organised excursion in San Juan. And this was also the first time that there were any other cruise ships in port with us. It had just been us in St. Kitts and Antigua. So there was a huge Royal Caribbean ship, the Allure of the Seas, which I think 3 or 4 years ago was the biggest cruise ship in the world, 6,000 passengers. So that was in dock, along with a smaller Viking ship. So San Juan kind of did feel busy, not overcrowded, but it certainly felt busy. We hadn't booked an excursion, so we weren't in any hurry to get off the ship. We had a relaxed breakfast in cabanas and then wandered off the ship around 9:30. And we didn't really have any sort of detailed plan of what we were going to do, but we'd figured out where the tourist information office was. So we headed for that first. It's only about a 10-minute walk from the ship, and picked up a proper map of the old San Juan area. And we also figured that we could get free Wi-Fi in the tourist info place, and it had a little lounge area. So we actually stayed there for 15 minutes or so just to catch up with social media and emails, which is maybe a good tip for anyone like us whose phone contracts make using data in the USA or Caribbean very expensive. We were effectively off-grid pretty much the whole cruise, just because UK phones don't work unless you want to spend a vast amount of money. So we did that, caught up on social media, and then we headed off to the huge fortress of the Castillo San Cristobal, which was built by the Spanish in 1783, and which is, of course, today managed by the US National Park Service, which is strange. It's very strange.
It is.
There's not a lot in there in the way of historical displays, and it was a really hot, humid day. So we explored for probably half an hour or so, and the views from up there on top of the fortress back down to the port area and the Fantasy were great. We then walked along the side of the old walls of San Juan, towards the other main fortress in old San Juan, which is the Castillo San Felipe del Morro. But by the time we got close to it, which I suppose is about a mile walk, something like that, we were starting to fade a bit in the heat. So we decided that we would turn back towards the ship. And we walked all along the old shopping streets, past the main cathedral, and then just made our way back to the port. So we thought that old San Juan was charming. A few of the art shops in particular had some really interesting items for sale. Again, we were tempted to spend some money and have some art shipped back to the UK, but we weren't quite brave enough to risk it. And overall, San Juan felt like it was a big contrast to switch from the very obvious British history of St. Kitts and Antigua to the very Spanish feel of San Juan, albeit with US park rangers popping up to sell you entry tickets, which was strange.
I kind of like those days when you don't have anything planned like that. You can take it easy. You don't feel rushed in the morning, and you guys ended up filling up and seeing some pretty good sights as well in San Juan, with the U.S. park rangers chasing you about a little bit. But
yeah, no, exactly. And we got back to the ship just before the massive rainstorm,
and then we're onto the aqueduct.
Yeah, that.
So 3 great port visits. You have a day at sea, and then you're off to Castaway Cay. How excited were you guys to visit Castaway Cay, your first time on the Disney's Private Island?
You know what? You're probably going to exile me from the show for saying this, but we're not beach-type people at all. We're pale, pasty Brits. Put us in our swimming costumes, and it looks like a family of ghosts has turned up. As everyone will have gathered, we like to be busy. So when we were planning the trip, we kind of wondered, what are we going to do on Castaway Cay? Are we going to be back on the ship by 11 a.m.? Oh, no. So we were a bit concerned about Castaway Cay.
All I get to say is it's a good thing Christy's not on here right now, because I think she'd have some words for you.
I know she would. It's just the biggest contrast. What did you do on Castaway Cay, Christy? Well, nothing. That's just not us. That's not us at all. So we decided that the only solution to our dilemma was to be brave and all sign up for the 5K run.
Oh no.
Well, I say run, but we were never actually planning to run it. Let's call it a 5K walk. So that was our plan. The ship docked around 9, and then there's obviously that delay when they have to get all the food and stuff that they need to get off the ship to service us all during the day. And they started to let us off just after 9:30, 9:35, something like that. And we'd been given a 5K start time of 9:45. So we were already waiting in the atrium stairwell, along with a lot of other people. You know, we were. I guess we get let off at deck 2, maybe deck 1, deck 2. Can't remember. Anyway, so we were queuing down that stairwell, which was a bit crazy, but everyone was well behaved, and we shuffled off in a pretty orderly fashion. We decided that waiting for the tram to take us down to the 5K start was probably not going to be a great move. So we just walked along down to the 5K start, which is by the bike rental, made a short detour to place some towels on chairs on the family beach. And then I guess it was probably about 10 o'clock before we set off on the 5K. And we were worried that it would be a 5K run and everybody would be very serious and running, and we'd be there walking gently along, and it would all be a bit embarrassing. But not like that at all. Lots and lots of people were walking, families, older couples, and it was all very relaxed and congenial. And it was hot. You know, everybody says it's hot, but it was hot. It was just over 80 degrees. So even walking, we were feeling it quite quickly. But there were lots of water stops. And I guess it took us just over an hour to get round, with a small jog over the final 100 yards just to show willing. And we're really glad that we did it. Very, very proud of our medals, which look excellent alongside our game show winner medals. Did I mention those already, Steve?
I think you did mention that once or twice.
Did I?
Yes, you did, John.
So we're really glad we did it. Actually, it felt like something special that not many people get to do. And even though we walked 99% of it, we still did it. So yeah, we're pretty proud of ourselves for doing that. And then we did head over to the beach, which was busy, but it didn't feel really crowded. The kids and I did some paddling in the water while Caroline sheltered in the shade and recovered from her exertions. And Sam and I swam out to Pelican Plunge. You were there the day after us, literally the day after us, weren't you?
Yeah.
It was a pretty nice day. It was windy in the afternoon, and actually all the afternoon activities I did notice got cancelled, but there were people doing stuff in the morning. But Pelican Plunge was busy. The lines to get on the slides were long, so couldn't be bothered with all of that. Gave it a miss. And we did hear from some people we were chatting to that the adult beach at Serenity Bay was absolutely packed out all day. It was really hard to find a lounger on Serenity Bay. So I think that reinforces the point of the slightly different demographic on the cruise. Lots of adult couples. So we had lunch at Cookies 2, where Sam was surprised to discover that it served other food beside cookies. He genuinely thought that's all he was going to get for his lunch. I know, funny. We thought lunch was pretty good. We had an ice cream, of course, after lunch. And then we split up. We split up into 2 groups. Caroline and James had kind of had enough by that point. So they walked slowly back to the ship, took a bunch of photos along the way, while Sam and I went to play in the sea for another hour or so. So for us, Castaway Cay, it's beautiful. It is absolutely beautiful. It's immaculately maintained by Disney. The 5K is well worth doing, even if you're not a runner. My advice to anyone would be don't be shy, don't be intimidated. It felt very friendly, and you absolutely didn't have to run. There were lots and lots of people who finished well after we finished. And despite our nervousness, we had a great day. I'd love to go back.
after 5 or 6 days, it's nice to get off the ship. Although you guys were in port and doing things in the ports as well, but that's a nice little run to kind of stretch your legs, whether you run it or walk it. And like you said, John, yeah, definitely. If anybody's out there that's interested in doing it, don't be shy to do it. It's not hardcore marathon runners out there running it. It's a fun event. So, well, from there you're on to your final night, and then back to Port Canaveral. How did you guys spend that? And then how was disembarkation for you?
So the final night was the Frozen show. So that was a great final night highlight for us. And we were really sad on that final morning. James is quite an emotional young man, and he pretty much cried from the time we woke up until, well, sometime after we'd left the ship.
Oh, no.
I know, but that's what he does. He always does that. And it's fine. It's fine to be sad. You know, it's the end of an amazing 8 days. So we weren't in a hurry that morning. We'd booked our ride back to Walt Disney World for 9 a.m. So we had a lazy breakfast in Cabanas and disembarked at around 8:15 because we weren't sure how long the whole security thing was going to take. Actually, it was very efficient. Took about 15 minutes to find our bags and clear customs. Very quick, very easy. When we got outside, we just borrowed a cell phone off somebody, called our ride company, who luckily said the driver was already on site. And 2 minutes later, we were on our way back to Walt Disney World for the final part of the vacation.
I think I love that about James. Alex, our youngest, is the same way. They kind of wear their hearts on their sleeves, and it's kind of crushes you sometimes. But I love their enthusiasm and the emotion when you see it come out too. So, well,
it shows you had a great time.
Exactly. Well, I think we have a little bit more time left, John, to kind of go over some of your thoughts about Walt Disney World. Where did you guys go back to and stay for those couple days that you were there? And do you have any overall thoughts on the different parks you visited, or anything that you want to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I'll do some quick thoughts.
Okay.
The 6 nights after the cruise, we were at the Polynesian, as we said. Didn't love it, if I'm honest. We thought the Polynesian felt old, tired, in urgent need of some renovation and some work on its customer service standards. We were in club level again. The concierge team were really good, but everybody else we thought were pretty terrible, actually. We had a few housekeeping issues, which it was difficult to resolve, even with the concierge team. So didn't love the Polynesian, even though we had a great view right across the lagoon towards Magic Kingdom. So perfect for the evening firework displays. A couple of other thoughts. Transportation. People, I guess, will know that Disney now have those boards which show the estimated wait times for buses. I thought those were the most irritating innovation ever because it was just plain wrong 90% of the time. I like tech, but I like tech that works. So if you're listening, Disney, just turn it off until you can get it to work accurately. On the plus side, we tried out the new Skyliner gondolas, which had only opened the week before we were there, and they were great. Big investment for Disney to make on that, but a brilliant way to get around. Loved those. Hands down, best park for Sam and me was Typhoon Lagoon. I just love that place. I could happily spend a whole week there. It's just perfect. In the main parks, so the rides which we hadn't done before, we enjoyed Slinky Dog Dash. We were super impressed by the styling in the whole of Galaxy's Edge. Thought they'd done that really well. But we were disappointed by the actual Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run. We did it a couple of times, and we switched around. We did it as both pilots and gunners. And I don't think any of us really quite got it as a pilot. I was never quite convinced that anything I was doing made much of a difference. I mean, you'll obviously have a much more informed view when you get to do it. And as a gunner, I was just too busy watching which button I was supposed to press to actually experience the flight. So for us, given all the hype that there's been around it, we'd vote it a miss rather than a hit. By far the best ride for all of us was Avatar Flight of Passage. Just absolutely exhilarating. None of us experienced any motion sickness on it at all, and just a blast. Thought it was brilliant. The only other thing I'd say was that the Food and Wine Festival was still taking place at Epcot, which was really good fun. Highlights for me were the lobster roll from the USA. I could have had several more than I actually had. And the chocolate pudding from Ireland. Very yummy. I'm sure you don't want to get into the ins and outs of dining plans, but it was a great way to use some of the many available snack credits which Brits get as part of the package. So Food and Wine Festival, really good. We did still have to make a trip to the Ghirardelli shop at Disney Springs on the final day to trade in the 30 snack credits, which we still had left unspent, however.
Holy cow. Did you guys bring back just a ton of chocolate?
Yeah, I don't know what it is in pounds. Probably about £10 worth of chocolate.
Oh, man.
Something like that. I think we spent 30 snack credits is $180 something.
Wow.
We just bought chocolate.
So I want to go back just a second here, and I'm going to use your words, but Pasty Brits, Castaway Cay, and yet your favorite park was Typhoon Lagoon? Isn't that the water park?
Yes, it is.
So how does that coincide?
Well, you can spend time in the water, and the rides are just great. But that's the point. You're not just sat on the beach.
Right. There's a lot to do there.
I mean, we did go around the lazy river twice. Mm-hmm. So we did just literally lie in a rubber ring and go around the lazy river. But I think that, the trick for all the parks is get there early, isn't it? And we were at Typhoon Lagoon as it opened. So Sam and I rode the Crush and Gusher, it's called, isn't it? Yeah. We rode that just back to back for the first 30 minutes, and there was just nobody. There was, we didn't have to stand in line at all. Yeah, I just think the rides are great at Typhoon Lagoon. The wave pool's fantastic. It's a great park.
People are going to probably shoot me, but I feel exactly the same way you do about the Polynesian. We've never actually stayed there, but that is just such a busy resort. There's so many people that go, and not only the people that stay there, but they go and visit there. On
the last day, we were kind of just wasting some time, so we did take the boat out to Wilderness Lodge just for a look. Uh-huh. And I thought Wilderness Lodge was beautiful. I thought it was just absolutely lovely.
Yeah, I think that's...
You like that one, don't you?
Yeah, Wilderness Lodge, and I like the Grand Floridian, but I think Wilderness Lodge is probably one of my favorites there.
Yeah.
That I've had a chance to spend some time at. Well, before we kind of finish this all up and have you sum up everything, I got a couple of just quick questions for you then. And I'll just put you on the spot. Aqua Duck or Aqua Dunk?
Okay, well, that's an easy question because I've only ever done one. So, Aqueduct.
What? I thought you did the dunk before.
Nope.
Well,
I promise you we'll do it next time.
All right, next time you got to get on it. Okay, Animator's palette on the Magic or Animator's palette on the Fantasy?
Animator's palette on the Fantasy, just because I think the decor is lovely.
Okay. And then the big one, Dream Class or Classic Ship?
Okay, so good question, and I have a few thoughts, but the short answer is not bothered. They both felt very similar, and we love them both equally. But there were some differences. So we liked the round bathtub on the Fantasy better than the traditional shape on the classic ships. Felt like just a nicer space for showering. We haven't talked about kids' clubs, and our boys hardly used them at all this time, but we did go to open house at both Edge and the Club Lab on the first day. I was really disappointed by the facilities at Edge. I'd heard that it was much bigger than the space on the Magic, but it certainly didn't feel like it. And actually, I kept wandering around, wondering whether somehow I'd missed a part of it. But no, that's all there was. We thought the club and the lab were really well laid out, good choice of activities. But being us, we were kind of always too busy for James to ever feel the need to go and spend any time there. And then my final thought would be around lounge spaces. As I guess it's pretty obvious to everybody, we do like to participate in game shows and quizzes. And I've never much liked Promenade Lounge on the Magic. It's too small, and the entertainment team are kind of down one end trying to host. So I was very keen to see how the Fantasy would be different. So D Lounge is on both ships, and both were fine. Although I thought it was strange that there was no bar in the D Lounge on the Fantasy. So you had to go off elsewhere if you wanted to buy a drink. Didn't really quite understand why they've done that. There is a bar on the D Lounge on the Magic. And then the equivalent of the Promenade Lounge appeared to be the Piazza, which I thought was a really odd space to use for family entertainment, given that it's laid out with a massive circular bar right in the middle of it. And I did ask some of the entertainment team what they thought. And they liked it for quizzes because they could just walk around, but they hated it for anything where the audience needed to be able to see the front, so the wheel or Family Feud. Because unless you were sat at the front few tables, it was really hard to engage with what was going on. And I know that some events are also in the tube. You know, we did the racing the potatoes was in the tube, but it does tend to be the adult space. So I'm just hoping that when they get round to design the Wish, or they probably have done, but anyway, the design for the Wish doesn't compromise and incorporates enough properly thought out space for all of the family entertainment activities. So that's my kind of compare and contrast. Love them both. Don't choose between them.
I'm with you. I hope they put a little bit more, I guess, emphasis for the Edge, for those kids, for that age group on the Wish. It just seems like the space is bigger, but I think they could probably do a little bit more with it for them compared to what they do with the Vibe. The Vibe is much nicer for the older kids. On the Dream, they have the District Lounge instead of the Piazza, and that's a much more open place. So you're right. They put that kind of bar like right in the middle. I know it's a carousel, so it's supposed to be kind of like that Italian-themed carousel, but you're right as far as the space to really
it's lovely. I'd happily sit and have a drink in there.
Right.
But for running game shows, it just doesn't really work.
Yeah, that seemed kind of weird as well. And then I guess the last thing I was thinking of, and I hadn't really thought about it this way before, but the Promenade Lounge is gone on the Wonder, so that's now the New Orleans theme space. I wonder if they're running some of the stuff there, or if they've moved that to someplace else. I know they always had the drawing classes there, like you were talking about. So,
yep.
Well, as we kind of wrap it up, then, John, comparing. You guys have done all the European cruises, or a lot of the European cruises, and now you finally come over to the Caribbean on the bigger ship. What are your thoughts between the two, and kind of final thoughts on the Disney Fantasy and your trip to the Caribbean?
It was a very different experience. You've done European cruises too, Steve, and you'll know that there tends to be lots of history to see, and history means long excursion days, and that's very tiring. This cruise was a totally different pace to that. We left the ship 4 times. On each occasion, we left for half a day. So we were still busy, and we fell into bed each night pretty tired, and we slept fantastically. But we never felt rushed. And I think that's the key difference. We never felt rushed at all. We were never jumping on the ship 2 minutes before we were due to sit down for dinner. So we found it an incredibly relaxing experience. We got to see some amazing new places, and we just loved every minute of it.
I kind of look at the Caribbean as almost like a beach vacation. And like you said, it's just a history vacation over there to see all those different places in Europe. Mm-hmm. They're very different vacations. We love them both for both of those reasons, I guess. Well, I guess you kind of spoiled it a little earlier, but what's next for you, Carolyn, and the boys?
We have another cruise booked with Disney, and we're revisiting partly our first ever cruise. So we're heading back up to the Norwegian fjords out of Dover, but heading via Amsterdam, which is somewhere that the kids haven't visited. And we're doing that next August on the Magic. Looking forward to it already. Should be fantastic.
Excellent. Does that go up to Geiranger by any chance?
No, it goes to a field, but it goes to a different field called Nordfjord.
Okay.
And I haven't really looked at what excursions you can do around there. So it does a field, but not that one.
That was just so beautiful once we got up there, too. So I can't wait to hear your guys' thoughts and kind of see your pictures and everything like that as you sail on the Magic next year. Just to kind of wrap it up, I guess, thanks again, John, for being such a huge part of our podcast. We really appreciate your guys' takes, kind of giving us a different view since you guys are over in England, and kind of giving us thoughts about coming over to America, experiencing our country a little bit, and the Caribbean and Walt Disney World as well. And I want to wish you guys just all the best over the holidays here. Have a great Christmas, and I look forward to chatting with you soon, and definitely bringing you back after you guys get back off your next cruise.
Yeah, thanks, Steve, and happy slightly early Christmas to you guys, and to Christy, and to Chris, and to all the listeners.
And I know that we talked earlier that you guys don't start Christmas until after some birthdays, so once I want to wish you guys happy birthdays, and once those pass, just join the rest of us in the holiday season, which has been going on since September here.
Thank you, that's very kind.
All right, well, all the best, John, and we look forward to talking to you soon.
Thanks. Bye now.
Well, that's going to wrap up our show today. Once again, I really want to thank John for coming on and sharing his and his family's amazing experience on the beautiful Disney Fantasy as they sailed 8 days through the beautiful Caribbean. And one thing that I know Chris and I just this past weekend, spending time in Marathon Weekend and getting to meet many of our listeners down there, can really attest to is one of the benefits of this podcast, not only in just interacting with you guys over the airwaves, is also just actually getting to meet you in person. And so it's always fun to be able to connect back with John and his family and kind of follow along. And that is, just like I said, a huge benefit for all of us here to get to know each and every one of you. And it's been a lot of fun interactions out there. Well, if you'd like to support our podcast, you can do so through our Patreon program. You can go over to patreon.com/DCL podcast, and you can find out all the information there. If you would like to get a hold of us and contact us, you can do so
either through Facebook, and that's Facebook at that's DCL Podcast on Facebook. Also, go ahead, if you would like to come on the show, you can send me a message, steve@dclpodcast.com, and we'll get you hooked up and scheduled to record your family's Adventures by Disney trip, Disney Cruise Line trip, or if you want to talk some Run Disney with us, we're going to bring some more of those shows to you as well. Well, between now and our next show, if you are heading out on your next vacation, all of us here at the DCL Podcast would like to wish you fair winds and safe travels as you head out on those next adventures. Once again, thanks for coming back and taking a listen, and we'll see you next time on the DCL Podcast.